Hi everyone. Okay, so I'm going to do another video today about grooming, and today's topic is going to be something that I've especially since opening my business, I've heard so many different things, and it's just mind-boggling all of the crossed, mismatched spew of information that just seems to be totally and absolutely without any cause whatsoever. So today I'm going to spend a few minutes going over things that, as a groomer and as somebody who's been professionally trained and who also has studied veterinary technician, things that your groomer should or shouldn't do that can really affect your grooming experience overall. So, like I mentioned in my last video, your groomer should know what kind of dog they're looking at. Now, like I said, with mixed breed dogs, you might get a dog that, let's say, is a boxer cross, but you think it might be a mastiff. Like, there's certain things that it really is not going to make an enormous amount of difference. But one of my biggest things that I've noticed so far, actually, there's two things that I've noticed incredibly. The first one is that a lot of people don't seem to understand the importance of plucking a dog's ears if they have fur growing in their ears. Now, some dogs it's totally unnecessary. Obviously, you're not going to pick the hair out of a St. Bernard or a Basset Hound or a Border Collie because there's just no hair in there to remove. But dogs like my mom's Bichon, who's sitting just right there, if you see me point in that direction, Bichons and Poodles and Maltese, they have fur that grows on the insides of their ears. And what the purpose of this fur is, I have no idea. But the main reason why I tell my clients that I pluck ears, or if people ask what the purpose is of this, what can happen is, especially with dogs who are prone to ear infections, not even particular breeds, but just dogs themselves, what can happen is if there's a lot of fur kind of hanging out in their ear canal, what can happen is you get dirt and gunk that kind of stays in there because there's a whole bunch of fur in the way. So by removing the fur, your ear has more ventilation. There's less of a chance of an infection developing, especially yeast infections, which thrive in hot, humid, moist environments. You put a whole bunch of hair in there, well, of course it's going to stay hot and humid and moist, and all that yummy bacteria is just going to sit in there, and it's just like the big happy haven. Another big reason why I will pluck a dog's ears is because when I groom, and people kind of chuckle at this, I don't do halfway grooms, unless, of course, there are exceptions. Unless there's a dog who is way overly stressed, or a cat who just does not want to be groomed, and it's now become detrimental to their health to continue. We will pick another day, and you can come back, and we'll try again. But otherwise, I don't do halfway. If your dog comes to my shop and gets a bath, it's going to be dry when it leaves. If you bring your dog in for a nail clip, I'm not just going to take the very tip off of the overgrown nail. I'm going to trim them as far back as I can. I don't do halfway grooms. And the same kind of goes with ear plucking. I can't properly clean your dog's ears if there's a mountain of fur between me and the inside of your dog's ear. So it kind of serves a dual purpose. Not only can I prevent possible ear infections, but I can properly clean your dog's ears if the fur is not there. Another thing that a lot of people don't really seem to connect one to the other is, and this I've noticed has become more evident the more dogs that I've groomed, improperly cut tails. I cannot explain to you how frustrating this is for me, especially since one dog came in. He wasn't overly matted, but obviously was in need of a groom, and his tail had been cut, what I like to say, backwards. Now, normally when you hold a tail out, so if this is the body this way and this is the end of the tail, the longest bit should be this way, and then it should get shorter as it goes into the body. Now, there are some exceptions to this rule. If you're clipping a golden retriever for show, it's actually the other way around. But because of the way that a golden retriever's coat is kept, it's really not a problem because dogs that have long drop coats, so your Shih Tzus, your Maltese, your Yorkies, stuff like that, what can happen is if their tails are actually in the way of them going to the bathroom, I'm sure you can figure out what's going to happen here. The poop gets stuck to their fur, gets stuck to their tail, etc., etc. Now you have an angry red bum because you've had all this grossness stuck to the end of it. And it's something that I stress to people who come in and say, well, I want my dog's tail to be long. And I will explain to them, I will keep it as long as possible, but please remember that this can cause a problem for your dog. And unless you are willing to routinely brush the back end of your dog, this can cause huge problems. And I don't mean just a little bit of matted fur. I mean like anal gland impaction and other really nasty things that can happen to your dog, which can result in either a very hefty vet bill or your dog actually dying. And I know it kind of sounds like way over the top considering, oh, well, it's just the dog's tail, but I've seen dogs come in whose tails are matted into the backs of their legs because they were just way too long and not kept. Another thing that I like to explain to people is this whole issue on expressing a dog's anal glands. Now, I understand that many years ago it was considered almost a service, I guess, to express a dog's anal glands. I don't know why. It doesn't make your dog smell. It doesn't really do anything. It's not like brushing their teeth or something. But it was considered a service. Now, lots of things have changed since, the 1940s. And expressing a dog's anal glands is no longer considered actually any benefit to the dog whatsoever. A dog's anal glands are very sensitive. It is a gland, so it's composed of very soft tissue. And what can happen is by constantly expressing these very soft tissues, you can actually damage the duct between the anal gland and the rectum, so when your dog poops, blah, 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 blah. There's a whole bunch of videos on YouTube. You can check out the gory details. So my bottom line is that I suggest that you, number one, if you're considering having your dog's anal glands expressed, really reconsider it. If your dog has never had problems with his anal glands before, don't even consider it. Really, you can cause more problems in the long run than good. The other thing is that if you bring your dog to a groomer, I always suggest asking, do you express dog's anal glands? Now, I personally, when people ask me that, I will be honest with them and say, I will check your dog's anal glands, but if there's nothing there, like if they're fine, then my hands are in the air, man. I'm not going there. Actually, my next door neighbor's dog, yes, my next door neighbor lives over there, her dog just went to the vet a couple weeks ago, $500 bill, because her anal glands were totally impacted, and I'm convinced it's because every 6 weeks she goes to the groomer, and guess what happens? So there's that. I'm trying to think of what else. Oh, this whole issue about shaving dogs in the summer. Dogs are not like people. We have sweat glands just about all over our body, which means that to regulate our heat, or our body temperature, we can sweat. Dogs don't have that same kind of mechanism. Yes, they have skin, and yes, they do sweat, but there are only 2 or 3 places, really. 3 places that your dogs will sweat. The insides of their ears, it's not really a sweat, but it is the same kind of idea. The tip of their nose, like that fleshy part of their nose, and the pads of their feet. That's it. Which means that by shaving off the fur that lies on the back of your dog, you're really not making them any cooler. The way I like to explain it to people is picture a piece of steel out on your front lawn in a nice sunny day. Now, if you put a blanket over top of that piece of steel, and put your hand, you come back about 3 or 4 hours later, put your hand underneath the blanket, between the blanket and the piece of steel, you tell me how hot that piece of steel will be. It might be a little warm, but it's not going to be scorching, because the blanket is now insulating the heat from the steel, so the steel is going to stay cooler, and the blanket's going to prevent the sun from beating down on the piece of steel. So if you were to take that blanket off, of course that piece of steel is going to get really damn hot pretty quickly because there's nothing there to protect it. Our skin is more like a piece of wood. If you put a blanket over a piece of wood, it's going to get pretty warm. But if you take it off, the wood will dry out, and it won't get as hot and sweaty and gross. So that's why when people say to me, oh, well, it only makes sense if you take the fur off the dog, it'll be colder. Really, because their skin is not built the same as ours, they don't have pores all over their skin, really you're not doing anything for them. Another thing is shaving your dog too close can actually damage the fur. I know I mentioned it in my last video that I've got more than one now. I've got probably about a dozen dogs that come in that their hair has been totally ruined because groomers have shaved their hair too close. Now, it is totally okay to go into your groomer and say, I want the dog shaved, but I don't want the dog shaved too close. The way that your clipper blades work, the higher the number, the closer the shave. So 40s and 50 are your surgical. 30s, a lot of people will use on the inside of pads if they're really furry. 15 is a little bit more common to use for that. Then you've got your 10, which is kind of anywhere between 10 and 15. I do a sanitary trim, so pads, armpits, stuff like that. A lot of people will groom a dog with a 7 blade. Now, I find that's way too short. Unless the dog has a particular issue, like I groom a Cocker Spaniel with a skin issue, so her fur, or his fur rather, needs to be kept fairly short. I prefer to go a little bit longer, more like a 5. But let's say you bring your dog in, let's say you have a golden retriever, and you go out a lot in the bush, and you find that it's very hard to keep her fur nice and clean and straight and dirt-free because it's so long. So you ask your groomer to shave it down a little bit. There is no problem with shaving the dog down just a little bit. There's snap-on combs. There are very long clipper blades. I actually shaved my St. Bernard in about March with what's called a 3 3/4 blade, and it's perfect. It's about 1 inch long, and she looks great, and it gives her just enough time to grow back the fur for the summer, and then I do it again in the fall so she's not cooking. When she goes inside, it's nice and hot. When she goes outside, it's nice and cool, but not so cold that she's freezing to death. So keep these things in mind when you go to the groomers. There's lots of misconceptions. Please do your reading. Don't just read one page. Read lots of pages. See what people say. See what other people are commenting. Remember that a lot of big corporations and, sadly enough to say, a lot of veterinarians will contort things to make you do something like, oh yeah, shaving your dog will make him cooler, and then you're bringing the dog to the vet in 2 weeks because it just passed out from heat stroke, but the vet's not going to tell you, oh, well, it's because you shaved your dog. So anyway, keep these things in mind. I'm going to do another video, of course, while I'm saying this. I'm pondering stuff about my pet peeves on grooming. So keep watch for that one. And if you have any questions about grooming misconceptions, please drop me a message, and I will get back to you.